President of India, the Prime Minister, you hear these titles constantly. They're clearly at the top. But how do their roles really stack up? What's the constitutional architecture that defines their powers and, maybe more importantly, their relationship?
Exactly. It's a fascinating interplay, really. And understanding that dynamic is, well, it's key to grasping how India is governed.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about individual authority, but, about a carefully constructed balance.
Okay, let's unpack this then, because today we're taking a deep dive into that constitutional framework, the one that establishes the roles of the president and the prime minister.
And we've got some good sources lined up.
We do. Our sources for this exploration include articles from La Bhumi, Drishti IAS, and Student Manipatra, plus some useful context on the PM from Wikipedia.
Yeah, these should give us a pretty multifaceted view from the legal nuts and bolts to broader analyses of the system in action.
So, for you, the learner, our mission here is to cut through the complexity. We want to deliver a clear, concise understanding of the powers, the responsibilities, and that crucial connection between these two offices.
They're looking for those aha moments, right?
Exactly. Highlighting the surprising aspects, maybe, but without getting totally bogged down in dense legal jargon.
We want to pull out the core knowledge and make it, well, digestible.
Okay, let's start with the president, the formal head of state. Article 52 of the Constitution establishes this office as the executive head of the state. Pretty straightforward, seems like.
It is, and Article 53 builds on that. It states that the executive power of the Union is vested in the president.
Okay.
Now, this power can be exercised directly or through subordinate officers, but always, within the constitutional limits.
Right.
What's also significant here, under Article 53, is that the supreme command of the defense forces is also vested in the president.
That really highlights the symbolic role, doesn't it? The nation's ultimate protector.
It does. A powerful symbolic position. But here's where the system gets interesting.
How'd they get elected?
Exactly. The president isn't directly elected by the people. Article 54 lays out how an electoral college makes that decision.
Why do it indirectly like that?
And that's a key point. This indirect election sort of underscores the president's intended role as a nonpartisan figurehead, distinct from the directly elected government.
Okay, so who's in this electoral college?
It's made up of the elected members of both houses of parliament, so the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, and the elected members of the state legislative assemblies.
Got it. And the method, Article 55, proportional representation by single transferable vote. Sounds a bit intricate.
It is a bit, yeah. But the core idea behind it is to ensure a balanced representation. You want the states represented fairly and parity between the states as a whole and the union in choosing the president.
So there's like a formula.
Yes, there's a specific formula. It assigns a value to each vote based on the state's population and its number of elected assembly members, and it balances that against the votes of the MPs.
Okay.
And it's all done by secret ballot. So, yeah, complex mechanics, but the aim is really a broad consensus in picking the president.
Right. So it's about more than just a simple head count.
Right.
Okay. What about their time in office? Article 56 covers the term.
Yes, pretty standard 5 years. That's from the date they assume the position.
And there are ways out.
Sure. The article also covers resignation, which goes to the vice president, and the whole process for impeachment, which is detailed in Article 61.
We'll get to that.
Right. And importantly, a president stays in office even if their 5 years are up until their successor takes over. Ensures continuity.
Makes sense. Now, who can even run for president? Eligibility. Articles 57 and 58.
Okay, the basics. Must be a citizen of India, at least 5 years old, and qualified for election as a member of the Lok Sabha.
The House of the People.
Correct. And a crucial condition, they cannot hold any office of profit under the government.
What does that mean exactly, office of profit?
It's basically a paid position under the central or state government that could create a conflict of interest or compromise their independence. There are exceptions, though, for the current president, VP, governors, or ministers.
Ah, okay. That ensures impartiality, presumably. Then Article 59 lays out the conditions while holding office.
Right. So a sitting president cannot be a member of parliament or a state legislature. If they were one before getting elected, they have to give up that seat.
Okay.
And again, no other office of profit. They get official residences, and their salary, allowances, privileges, those are set by parliament, and importantly, cannot be reduced during their term.
And the salary.
Wikipedia puts it at $280,000 per month currently.
Right. And before they start, there's an oath, Article 60.
Indeed. A formal oath or affirmation. It's administered by the Chief Justice of India, or if they're unavailable, the senior-most Supreme Court judge.
What do they pledge?
It's a powerful commitment to faithfully execute the office, to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and the law, and to devote themselves to the service and well-being of the people of India.
A weighty oath. Now, Article 61, impeachment. How does that even work? Removing a president.
Okay, so impeachment is specifically for a violation of the Constitution. It can be initiated by either House of Parliament.
Either one. Okay.
Yeah. The process kicks off with a written notice. It needs to be signed by at least 1/4 of the total members of the House starting it, and they have to give 14 days notice.
So a significant minority needed just to start.
Exactly. Then it requires a resolution passed by a majority of not less than 2/3 of the total membership of that House.
Wow. 2/3 of the total members, not just those present and voting?
Correct. The very high bar really underscores how serious this is meant to be.
So if one house passes that,
Then the other House investigates the charge. Or it can appoint a body to investigate. And critically, the president has the right to appear and be represented during this investigation.
they get to defend themselves.
Absolutely. Then, if the investigating House also passes a resolution, again by that 2/3 majority of its total membership, declaring the charges sustained, well, the president is removed from office.
It sounds incredibly difficult to actually pull off.
It is. And our sources note it's seen as a remote possibility. Largely because, as we'll discuss, the president usually acts on the advice of the Council of Ministers.
How does that make impeachment less likely?
Because typically, if there's a major issue with the government's actions or advice, Parliament's check is usually aimed at the government itself, like through a vote of no confidence against the Prime Minister and the Council.
Ah, okay. You target the ones giving the advice.
In most scenarios, yes. But the impeachment mechanism is still there. It's a crucial constitutional safeguard, against potential presidential actions that clearly violate the Constitution, independent of advice.
Got it. What if the office just becomes vacant, like through death or resignation? Article 62.
Right, filling vacancies. If it's because the term is ending, the election for the next president must happen before the term expires.
Smooth transition.
Yep. If it's due to death, resignation, or removal, an election has to be held ASAP, but definitely within 6 months.
And the person elected then?
They get a full 5-year term. It's not just filling out the remainder. Again, It's about stability.
Okay. Continuity is key. Now, Article 361, this gives the president some significant protection, doesn't it?
It does. It's about immunity. Essentially, Article 361 grants the president immunity from legal proceedings during their term for actions taken in their official capacity.
So they can't be sued for doing their job.
Broadly, yes. They aren't answerable to any court for exercising their official powers and duties. Now, that doesn't mean their actions can't be challenged in court. They can, but the government would defend those actions, not the president personally.
Okay. And criminal cases?
No criminal proceedings can be started or continued against a president during their term. They can't be arrested or imprisoned. For civil cases related to their personal acts, proceedings can happen during their presidency, but only after giving 2 months written notice.
So pretty strong legal insulation while in office.
It is. The idea is to let the president perform their duties without fear of, undue legal harassment.
Makes sense. Okay, let's pivot to the actual powers the president has. It sounds like more than just cutting ribbons.
Oh, absolutely. The president holds substantial powers, executive, legislative, emergency powers, though the key is how independently they're exercised.
Let's start with those executive powers.
Okay. As head of state, all executive actions of the Indian government are formally taken in the president's name. That's Article 77.
So everything the government does is officially by order of the president.
Technically, yes. Internationally, the president represents India. They appoint and receive ambassadors, and all treaties and international agreements are concluded in their name.
We mentioned Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces earlier.
Yes, Article 532. And they make key appointments. The Prime Minister, other ministers, though, on the TM's advice, crucially state governors, judges of the Supreme Court and high courts, heads of commissions like the UPSC, the Election Commission.
So a lot of appointment power.
A lot of formal appointment power, yes.
Yeah.
Article 77.3 also lets the president make rules for the smooth running of government business.
Okay. Now, one power that always seems particularly interesting is the pardoning power. Article 72. That feels like a really significant authority.
It is. It serves multiple purposes, really. It can correct potential judicial errors, allow for mercy based on specific circumstances, or even reflect changing social values over time.
So what exactly can they do under Article 72?
The president can grant pardons, reprieves, respites, remissions, or commute sentences. This applies in cases involving court-martial, offenses against union laws, and, importantly, all cases where a death sentence has been given.
That sounds absolute, but you mentioned checks earlier.
Yes. While the power is broad, courts have established that its exercise is subject to judicial review to prevent it being used arbitrarily or unfairly.
Okay, can we quickly break down those terms? Pardon, reprieve.
Sure, a pardon completely removes both the sentence and the conviction,
Hmm.
wipes the slate clean.
Okay.
A reprieve is a temporary stay of execution of a sentence,
Mm-hmm.
usually to give time for a pardon plea.
Right.
Respite means awarding a lesser sentence due to some special circumstance, like a convict's physical disability.
Mm.
Commutation is substituting one form of punishment for a lighter form, like death sentence to life imprisonment.
Got it.
And remission reduces the period of a sentence without changing its character, say 10 years reduced to 5.
Okay, quite a toolkit there. Let's move on to legislative powers. The president's involved there too.
Absolutely. They're an integral part of Parliament, even though they don't sit in either house.
House.
The president has the power to summon Parliament sessions, prorogue them, meaning end a session without dissolving the House, and dissolve the Lok Sabha entirely, usually paving the way for elections.
And bills.
Crucially, no bill passed by both houses can become an act, become law, without the president's assent. That's a vital step.
Though usually given on government advice, right?
Almost always, yes.
Yeah.
But it's a formal power they hold. And then there's Article 123, the power to promulgate ordinances.
Ah, yes, ordinances. That's like the president making laws when Parliament isn't sitting.
Essentially, yes. An ordinance has the same force as an act of Parliament, but it's a temporary measure, designed for when Parliament isn't in session, but urgent legislation is needed.
What are the limits on that?
Big limits. Every ordinance must be laid before both houses when they reconvene. It automatically ceases to operate 6 weeks after Parliament reassembles unless both houses approve it.
So Parliament gets the final say.
Absolutely. Or Parliament can pass resolutions disapproving it even sooner, and the president can also withdraw an ordinance any time. It ensures parliamentary oversight.
Okay. A powerful tool, but temporary and checked. Finally, the president has these major emergency powers.
Yes. Outlined in the Constitution for exceptional circumstances. Article 352 allows the president to declare a national emergency if there's a grave threat to India's security war, external aggression, or armed rebellion.
And that has big consequences?
Huge. It can alter the federal balance of power, suspend certain fundamental rights. It's a drastic measure.
Then there's Article 356.
That's for a state emergency, often called President's Rule. If the president is satisfied, maybe based on a governor's report, that a state government can't function according to the Constitution, they can impose central rule.
Controversial sometimes.
Often, yes. And lastly, Article 360 covers a financial emergency. If India's financial stability is threatened, the president can issue directions, including potential salary reductions for government employees.
So, extraordinary powers for crises. Okay, that covers the president in detail. Let's shift focus now to the prime minister, the head of government, the one often seen as wielding the real day-to-day power. What's the constitutional basis there?
Well, the core articles are 74 and 75. Article 7401 is fundamental. It says there shall be a council of ministers with the prime minister at the head to aid and advise the president.
Aid and advise.
And crucially, it says the president shall act in accordance with such advice. There's a small proviso added by the 44th Amendment. The president can ask the council to reconsider the advice, but only once. If they give the same advice again, the president must accept it.
That really cements the PM's role. And Article 75.
Article 75(1) says the prime minister shall be appointed by the president, and the other ministers are appointed by the president on the advice of the prime minister.
So the president appoints, but based on the PM's choices for the cabinet.
Exactly. And it's crucial to remember that principle we touched on, collective responsibility. The PM and the cabinet swim, or sink together, accountable to Parliament.
Right. So the president is the formal head, but the real executive authority, the direction, comes from the PM and the Council of Ministers. And they answer to the Lok Sabha.
That's the heart of the parliamentary system right there. Effective power rests with the PM and cabinet, who come from and are responsible to the legislature.
How does someone actually become prime minister? Appointment, tenure.
Okay, the president appoints the PM. Usually after an election, it's straightforward. The president invites the leader of the party or coalition that has a clear majority in the Lok Sabha.
But what if it's messy? No clear majority.
That's where the president might have some discretion. They need to choose someone they believe can command the confidence of the House, someone who can form a stable government.
And the PM has to be an MP.
They must be a member of either the Lok Sabha or the Rajya Sabha. If they aren't when appointed, they have 6 months to become one.
And how long do they stay?
As long as they command the confidence of the Lok Sabha. If they lose a vote of no confidence, they and their government must resign. Or, of course, the PM can choose to resign anytime.
Okay. What are the main jobs, the primary powers of the PM?
Well, as head of government, the PM chairs the Council of Ministers. They're central to making policy decisions and overseeing how those policies are implemented by the ministries.
Big coordinating role.
Huge. The PM also advises the president on all those key appointments we mentioned earlier. Election commissioner, CAG, UPSC chair, attorney general, and so on.
Right.
And as head of the appointments committee of the cabinet, the PM has a decisive say in postings for top civil servants and senior military officers.
So, significant influence over the state machinery.
Absolutely. Legislatively, the PM and cabinet drive the government's agenda through Parliament, working to get bills passed. And Article 78 specifically makes the PM the main channel of communication between the president and the cabinet.
The go-between.
Essentially. And they're usually the leader of the House,
Yep.
typically the Lok Sabha, guiding debates and government business there.
It's interesting to think historically, Nehru was the first PM, and for a long time.
Indeed. 16 years. Hugely foundational value for post-independence India, its policies, its non-aligned stance.
And then others followed.
Yes, people like Lal Bahadur Shastri and Indira Gandhi with her major, sometimes controversial, policies. Then that period after 1989 saw lots of coalition governments, more political flux.
Right, more instability then.
Until leaders like Vajpayee and Manmohan Singh oversaw periods of significant economic change. And now, the current PM, Narendra Modi.
Notable for being born after independence.
Right, and the first to win 3 consecutive terms, signaling another significant phase in Indian politics.
And you can see the political evolution reflected in the parties, too. Congress dominating early on, then the rise of the BJP.
Absolutely. The party system is central to how this all plays out.
On a practical level, what about pay and perks for the PM?
Well, the salary figure we found, again from Wikipedia, is $280,000 per month. Plus, of course, the official residence, travel, very high-level security, the Special Protection Group, or SPG, and the Prime Minister's Office, the PMO, which is a significant administrative support structure.
And there are also specific funds linked to the PM's office.
Yes, a few key ones. The National Defense Fund, where the PM is chairperson, the Prime Minister's National Relief Fund for disaster aid, and the more recent PM CARES Fund, set up during the pandemic. These generally rely on voluntary donations.
Okay. So we've looked at the president and the PM individually. Let's now try to weave it together. How do they actually interact within India's system? What's the core relationship?
It all comes back to India choosing a parliamentary system, heavily influenced by the British model. That's the foundation.
And in that system?
The executive, the PM, and the Council of Ministers is directly accountable to the legislature, mainly the Lok Sabha. That principle of ministerial responsibility dictates the whole interaction.
And this keeps coming up. Nominal versus real head. President is the constitutional nominal head.
Right. Acting on the advice of the PM and Council is Article 74(1) mandates.
While the PM is the head of government, wielding the actual executive power day to day.
Precisely. The president's formal powers are vast, but they're mostly exercised on the advice of the PM and cabinet. It reflects that core parliamentary idea. The elected government, the one with the legislature's confidence, should direct the state.
You mentioned borrowing the parliamentary system. What specific bits related to this president-PM dynamic did we adopt from the UK?
Well, the Indian Constitution explicitly adopted the parliamentary form of government and the cabinet system from the British framework. That includes having a head of state who is distinct from the head of government.
Okay.
Also, the whole idea of cabinet government, where the executive comes from and answers to the legislature, and that mechanism of a vote of no confidence as the ultimate check.
It's always useful to compare. We mentioned the UK, similar parliamentary system. What are the key similarities, but also the key differences in how their head of state and head of government work?
Okay, similarities. Parliamentary system, bicameral legislature, though different powers, independent judiciary, similar election system for the lower house, first past the post.
Right.
Differences,
Yeah.
big ones. UK has an unwritten evolved constitution. India's is written codified. India has single citizenship. UK allows dual. Amending India's constitution is a mix of rigid and flexible. UK's is more flexible via convention.
And the head of state?
Huge difference. UK has a hereditary monarch. India has an elected president, making India a republic.
Okay.
Conventionally, the UK PM is from the Commons. India's PM can be from either house. India allows non-MPs as ministers for 6 months, not the UK practice. India has broader judicial review. UK has parliamentary sovereignty. India has directive principles and fundamental duties. UK doesn't. UK has a formal shadow cabinet. India doesn't, not in the same way. And UK ministers have a kind of legal responsibility for the monarch's acts, which doesn't quite map onto India's president acting on advice.
Very interesting distinctions. What about the U.S. presidential system? How does their president's relationship with Congress compare to India's PM parliament dynamic?
The U.S. comparison really highlights the parliamentary versus presidential divide. Similarities are fewer bicameral legislature, republics, preambles, but the power structure is totally different.
How so?
U.S. Constitution. Shorter, less detailed. Federation history. U.S. formed by states agreeing. India more centralized formation. Citizenship. U.S. dual. India single. Representation. U.S. Senate equal per state. India's Rajya Sabha based more on population. Powers. U.S. has clearer division. India uses union, state, concurrent lists, residuary powers. India's parliament. U.S. states. Constitutions. U.S. federal and state. India single. Laws. India more uniform. U.S. more state variation. Boundaries. India's parliament can change state lines. U.S. federal gov needs state consent.
And the core difference in government form.
Exactly. U.S. president is both head of state and head of government, directly elected, fixed term, separate from legislature. India has a separate president, state, and PM government, with the PM responsible to legislature. Also, U.S. judges have life tenure. Indian judges have retirement ages.
These comparisons really throw India's unique model into relief. Okay, one last crucial concept for understanding the PM's relationship with Parliament. Collective responsibility. Article 75.3. What does that mean in practice?
Article 75.3 is absolutely vital. It says the Council of Ministers is collectively responsible to the Lok Sabha.
Collectively, meaning?
Meaning the entire government, led by the PM, stands or falls together before the lower house. If the Lok Sabha passes a vote of no confidence, it's not just the PM who goes, the entire Council of Ministers must resign.
So they're all in it together.
Precisely. It ensures the executive is constantly accountable to the people's elected representatives. It forces unity within the government because they know they share the same fate based on Lok Sabha's confidence.
Okay, so let's bring this all together for you, the learner. What we've seen is that the President of India is the formal head of state. They have significant powers on paper, yes, but in practice, these are almost always exercised on the aid and advice of the Prime Minister and the Council of Ministers. The Prime Minister, as the head of government, is the one who holds the real executive authority day to day. They lead the majority in the Lok Sabha. They shape policy.
It's a carefully constructed balance. The elected government is ultimately accountable to Parliament and through them to the people.
It's a system really designed for accountability and responsiveness, isn't it?
That's the goal, yes.
Now, here's something that kind of stood out as surprising. Despite the absolutely immense power and the pivotal role the Prime Minister plays, the Constitution itself only mentions the office directly in, 4 articles? 74, 75, 78, and 366, which is definitions.
That is a very insightful observation.
It really highlights how much of the PM's actual power and functioning comes not just from the text, but from, parliamentary conventions, the realities of governing, the political context.
Exactly. The foundational principles are there, but the operational dynamics, how it actually works, is hugely shaped by these established practices and precedents built up over decades.
So understanding this intricate relationship, this dynamic between the president and the prime minister, it's just crucial if you want to grasp Indian politics, how policies get made, how the whole government machine actually functions.
It really provides the essential backdrop for making sense of the day-to-day workings of the Indian state.
Okay, and here's a final thought for you to maybe mull over. Given that the president's role is largely ceremonial in most situations, yet the office technically holds these significant formal powers, what are the potential upsides and maybe the downsides of this specific arrangement in a modern democracy like India?
That's interesting.
And maybe think about what happens or what could happen when those unwritten rules, those established conventions governing the relationship between the president and PM, what if they get tested or challenged in ways we haven't quite seen before? It's definitely a fascinating dynamic to keep watching.